Hi everyone, I am Giselle Garces. I am the registered dietitian here at the Healthy Living Program. I'm here today to talk about food labels, how to read food labels, what is a food label, what are some important points about food labels, what's changing in food labels, and what you normally see and how to kind of really go about deciphering this kind of weird stuff. In 2016, the FDA has decided to change the way food labels are printed and what's on the food label. So I'm going to be referencing both. You're already seeing a lot of companies using new food labels, but some companies are continuing to take their time in changing them. By 2020, you should see basically all food labels being pretty uniform and using a lot of the same or using the same structure. So this is the original nutrition label. This is the new one. So right off the bat, you can see some big changes in the sense of calories and serving sizes are much larger. Another big thing that's changing is suggested serving sizes. Sometimes people don't notice them, and other times they really aren't very realistic. Suggested serving sizes will be changing according to what people realistically eat on a daily basis. So for instance, ice cream. Right now, serving sizes for ice cream are a half a cup. Very few people just eat a half a cup of ice cream. Most people usually have about 2/3 of a cup, so it's going to be more like that. And there will be other measurements and other columns to easily let you know how much is in what you're eating instead of it being confusing or requiring math. So it wants to be a lot easier. Total fat is going to be divided into saturated and trans fats. You want to get as little trans fat as possible. Little as in none. Trans fats are basically only in a lot of like processed, boxed, pre-packaged, pre-prepared foods. So you always want to see 0. And if there is no section for trans fats, what you can do is look at the ingredient list. And if there's anything that says hydrogenated oils, that will give you a clue as to whether or not it has trans fats. So saturated fats, it's another component to be mindful of because you want to not get too much of saturated fats, right? Saturated fats can increase risk of heart disease, clog arteries, things like that. Just being mindful of the source of the food and how much saturated fat a food has. Like this, for instance, has 1 gram, so it's low. Saturated fats are fats that are solid in room temperature. They mostly come from animal sources. There is 2 plant sources that are saturated fats, and that is coconut and palm. Both of those oils are solid at room temperature, and so that's a really good indication that something is saturated. If it's liquid at room temperature, it is unsaturated. Obviously, you want to get most of your fat sources from unsaturated fats because they're going to be a lot better for your heart and for your cardiovascular health. You can have some saturated fat in your diet and that be totally healthy, but again, that being a lot less of the amount of your total dietary fat. The amount of cholesterol in a food, that's something that you want to get less of. Cholesterol only comes from animal products, so something that has a liver. Does it have a liver? It's not going to have cholesterol. So fruits and vegetables, no cholesterol. Sodium. Sodium's another big one. You want to make sure that that's not extremely high either. The reason why you don't want to get too much of it is because it can increase your blood pressure. And again, everybody's different. Some people are more predisposed to having high blood pressure, and so they have to be a lot more careful with sodium amounts than maybe someone else who is not predisposed to blood pressure. Recommended amount is about 2,300 milligrams per day, which is about a teaspoon. Again, places with high amounts of sodium are going to be boxed, pre-packaged, pre-prepared foods and things like chips and stuff like that. So just being mindful of how much sodium a food has. So then the next category is total carbohydrates. Total carbohydrates is divided into dietary fiber, total sugars, and something that is new is added sugars. And this is a really good category to add because sometimes people aren't aware of how much added sugars a food has. So there's naturally occurring sugars and then there's added sugars. This is something that you can see in the food label as well, like what are the added ingredients in the food. But you can also really see it easily in the total added sugars category. It's right there, so it'll tell you exactly how much is added. So that'll just give you a good idea of how much extra sugar a food has. Important thing about total carbohydrates. So there is the total amount, right? And then if, for instance, like in this example, there's 4 grams dietary fiber. So the carbohydrate load of this actual food is going to be 4 grams less than 37 grams because fiber, what it does is it lowers the impact that sugar has in your body and in your bloodstream. Fiber is a really wonderful thing. Fiber comes in whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and it's really important to get lots of those. So protein. On a food label, it's just going to be a single item. It's going to be protein, and it's going to just tell you how many grams of protein a food has. In general, the amount of protein that a single person would need would be about 0.8 to 1 gram per kilogram body weight. So it is actually a lot less than what people believe that they need. And if you're having protein sources at every meal and snack, it's probably not necessary to focus on foods that are really concentrated in protein, like for instance a protein bar. And if you're into bodybuilding or specific kinds of athletics, then maybe you need a little bit more protein in your diet, but not an extreme amount. The other thing that has changed is mandatory vitamins and minerals. So before it was vitamin A and C. Most people are not deficient in A and C, so they took those out and added the vitamins and minerals that most people really need to focus on and where most people have deficiencies. So it's going to be mandatory to have vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. The other big thing that's changing is that all the daily value percents are going to be updated with all the new scientific data, so they're going to be a lot more accurate amounts instead of like really old data going into this information. The food label is always based on a general 2,000 calorie diet per day, which is a very average amount. A lot of people will be a little bit less than that, or maybe a little bit more than that. In addition to looking at the food label, it's always really important to look at the ingredient list of a food. That will give you a really good sense of what's exactly in your food. And the first ingredient is going to be the highest amount in the food. So first is going to be the most, and the last will be the least. It's important to take nutrition labels with a grain of salt because especially when you're cooking for yourself and you're buying a lot of fresh foods, a lot of these things aren't going to have food labels. So just making sure that you're getting a variety of foods and a balance of foods. You want to eat a diet high in fruits and vegetables. You want to have a good amount of protein, dairy, and fat sources in your diet so that you're getting enough that your body needs. And when you are eating foods that have food labels, it's just a way for you to be aware of what's in it. But if you're really in the mood for something that is sweet or salty or crunchy or whatever it is, you can definitely allow that in your diet. Just be mindful of your overall balance, and that's really the main thing. Thank you for watching. I hope that this was informational and educational for you. Thank you.